What a blessing to be here. I can't tell you really what a blessing it is for me to be here. Huge, huge, huge blessing. I'm very grateful to be asked back after my embarrassing performance the last time. I know I said some things I shouldn't have, and I apologize to that woman in particular. I travel so much sometimes that I forget where I have been, and it literally wasn't until I think 2 days ago that I realized, oh, I'm going back there. I mean, because I was just thinking, I got to worry about, I was spoke in San Jose, California yesterday, where there's a wonderful church, Calvary Church in San Jose, California. They have been through hell because, when you stand up, people are going to come after you, but praise the Lord, they continue to stand and they're fighting, and there's a lot of folks like that around this country that are finding out what it means to be a Christian in a way, right? Like the Lord in His mercy allows us to experience ugly stuff, and He promises us that all things work together for good for those that love Him and are called according to His purposes. Now, that's God's word to us, and we're idiots if we don't believe it, but I guess we're idiots because we rarely really understand that's absolutely incontrovertible truth. And so if you're being attacked or if you're going through something difficult, the Lord wants us to say, okay, this works together for good for Him. Who loves the Lord and is called according to God's purposes. I was my flight was delayed last night. I was in at San Francisco airport with hours, And have you ever been in one of those situations where you say, Lord, why? Like, why do I have to just suffer this bleak? I was exhausted. I wasn't able to get anything done. It was just like, I just want to go to bed, but I'm in the wrong city currently, and it was really, it's just kind of one of those things where you just feel like the enemy's doing a number on you in a sense because it's getting to you, and you're kind of, and the flight was delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and then we got on the flight unbelievably late, and of course I'm still on East Coast time, so. For me, it's like I'm getting on the flight, and it's like, isn't it midnight now? I should be snoring. And then it was stuck on the tarmac forever. Don't ask me why. It's like saying, why did Adam and Eve eat that apple? Do we really want to have that conversation? Like bad stuff happens, and we understand that it's complicated. But, I didn't get to the hotel room in Portland until, I don't know, by my body clock, it was like 3:30 a.m. or something. And I'm not one of those people. There are some people who thrive on that kind of stuff. I'm not one of them. But some people do, they're like, that's fine, I'm fine. I'm 4 hours sleep. I hate you. No, I don't, but I say this without any hyperbole, but just the blessing of being here tonight, meeting so many of you already, the unbelievably kind things so many of you have said to me, and the gloriousness of the worship here is, God's answer to me of, why he lets me go through some stuff sometimes in a way. I don't want to get into that too theologically, but it's just like you just say, well, Lord, you really... You do know how to bless us. You're a good God, and you love us. And I really mean it when I say how blessed I am to be here. I'm moved, frankly, by what you have here. And I know not everyone who's here tonight goes to this church. How many of you here attend this church regularly? So like a good amount of you. But a lot of you, I don't know how you heard about this, but the word got out on the streets that Metaxas is showing up, and so I'm just grateful to those of you who came here from some distance. I want to talk tonight about the book, my most recent book, my shortest book ever, called Letter to the American Church. And now, why I wrote it, I'll give you the short version, is that I believe God called me to write it. Now, Christians say stuff like that a lot of times, and I don't know what it means. Have I done something wrong? Was it your mother that I insulted the last time? No. Oh, we just got a different mic. But it was, it really was a case where, a lot of times Christians say, well, the Lord called me to do this, or God said this, or God said that. And you don't know how they mean it, right? Thank you. All right. Is this working? Yeah, hey, that's working. Wow, this one's so good, I'm about to sing. Yeah, no, this is good. Thank you, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, all right. Nice guy. Does he go here? But yeah, so this book is called Letter to the American Church, and it is this okay, right? Yep. Christians often say, well, God called me to write this or called me to write that. And, you depending on who's saying it, you don't know how to take it. Because some people just love to use religious language, The Lord, called me to, I don't know, park there. Whatever. We're get into it. But in retrospect, I know that the Lord called me to write many of my books particularly, right? That even when I was doing it at the time, I didn't discern it. I just thought, well, it's a good idea, and I prayed about it, and But then in retrospect, I look back on how the Lord called me to write the Bonhoeffer book and the Wilberforce book, and I realize without any question that was God's hand in my life, particularly guiding me to write that book. I know it in retrospect, okay? This book, I knew that I had to write it in a different way than I've ever felt before. I had these ideas, and it's almost like I don't know how the Lord speaks to you or whether you believe the Lord speaks today, and if you don't, you're wrong. But we all hear from the Lord differently and stuff, and sometimes I will just have a thought, and I know it's my thought, but it's highlighted in a way, like the Holy Spirit highlights it, so I realize, well, it wasn't exactly my thought, right? And but I just knew that I had to say some of the things. And at the heart of this book, the title, Letter to the American Church, was not the original title. The original title was Huck Finn, but it was taken. And no, it's just kidding. The original title, I was going to title it Faith Without Works is Dead. Because I thought that's at the heart of the message of this book. Now, as you know, Faith Without Works is Dead is James writing in the New Testament. And it's a real corrective to anybody, including Martin Luther, who was a great guy but not a perfect guy, that, when you say it's all about faith, it's all about faith, some people are really obsessed with the idea that it's all about faith. You're like, well, great, but what does that mean? Right? A lot of times we get obsessed with words and concepts, but you're like, well, what does that mean? It's all about faith. So I can just believe something, and I'm saved by what I believe, but what if how do you know I really believe it? Because I told you I believe it? People say, what do you believe? Well, my faith. Well, you go to my church's website, there's a statement of faith, that's what I believe, right? And I say, well, that could be a fig leaf. Like, that's not fooling God, because he sees your life, and he knows you don't believe that, otherwise you wouldn't be living the way you live, right? Raise your hand if you're guilty. Well, the fact is that sometimes people over-intellectualize the faith. They act like it's all about this theology. I believe this theology, whatever. And, the devil is not scared by your theology. And God is not impressed with your theology. Because he sees your life, and if you actually live what you believe, that's okay, then you really do believe it. But I just felt like there's this heresy that has crept into the church, into the American church, that's actually dramatically similar to the heresy that crept into the German church in the 1930s, that Bonhoeffer was railing against when he wrote Cost of Discipleship, and he talked about cheap grace, right? Because these people would say, well, it's all about grace. In other words, it doesn't really matter what I do, it's all about grace. And he'd be like, well, okay, yeah, it's about grace, but are you aware of the price that was paid for that grace that you're so flippantly referring to? Do you understand what that means? Because if you don't understand what it means, you're not saved by grace, right? There is no faith if you don't really understand what God sent his son through hell so that you could say, oh, it's about grace. If you don't really understand the price that was paid, then you don't have the faith that you are claiming you have. And so it's kind of like those of us who are, uh-oh, what's going on? Chuck, what's happening? It's okay? You're going to play guitar behind me? You just think it needs a mood or something, or what? No, I don't mind. Is that are you looking for more reverb? What are we looking for? Is this okay? I don't know. Listen, I love you guys. Like, this is the fact that you actually care enough to come up here and make me feel very confused and agitated. It's like, I know, that's like, it's okay? It's all right. Okay. So, hey, listen, people say, Eric, why did you come back here? Because that guy invited me. And I like that guy. And I feel very honored. I want to tell you, I do not say this stuff lightly. I feel so blessed by this church. I want you to know that. I felt that last time, and I say it again. And I'm not just saying it. I don't know how to prove it to you, but I feel very blessed. But what I'm referring to is this idea, because you kind of think, how is it that things happen, right? How is it that the German church could have been silent in the face of evil as the Nazis rose? You say, how did that happen, right? And I think a lot of us want to kind of put them in a special category. Oh, it's the Nazis. That's just like crazy stuff. And you think, no, that's not right, because the Germans of that time were dramatically similar to us today. They were very sophisticated, very Christian in a way, very culturally Christian, very, very sophisticated culture, educated. So this was not just some like loony thing that happened in history that doesn't happen again. And the parallels to where we are today are overwhelming. Now, unfortunately, that's true, right? It's not me making it up. I know, not just because I wrote the story on Bonhoeffer, but I mean, I see dramatic similarities that they made the same mistake, and Bonhoeffer was, kind of calling them out on it in writing about cheap grace and saying, you say, in a sense, I don't have to do anything, I'm saved by grace. And he's like, well, that's cheap grace. You don't understand grace. And I realize that that's part of what happened and what has happened over time to the American church, that we focus so much on, you can focus on a good thing and make an idol of it, or focus on it to the point that you get confused. But like we focused on evangelism so much that we forgot about truth. And you think, well, I don't ever want to say anything that might push somebody away because it's all about the gospel. And you think, well, that's not a biblical idea, that it's like, there's this pure gospel and I can just stick to that thing and not mention anything else. Because, listen, there were pastors in the 19th century who wouldn't speak out against slavery because they thought, well, I want to be divisive. Right? Now, it's very easy for us to judge them. We go, oh, can you imagine that they would be that cowardly, that they wouldn't speak out on slavery? Well, the question is, what are we being cowardly about now? And there's an infinity of things that we're being similarly, it all depends on the culture, right? If you're in a culture, if you're going to an all-white church in 1850s in some place or whatever, and nobody else is bringing up the satanic abomination of slavery, then you're like, yeah, well, we're not going to talk about that. Well, what is it in your world or in our world or in the world of the church in America today that we're like, well, I don't want to talk about that or that or that, or what do I have to keep my head down about? And the parallels are dramatic in that they were similarly persuaded that we just want to preach the gospel. We don't want to talk about something divisive like slavery or whatever. And you think, well, if you want to talk about that, what gospel are you preaching, sir? Like, it's not a real message of God if it lacks this kind of tang of truth that's going to be divisive. And, it's a little complicated here. But that's what happened in Germany. In Germany in the 30s, Bonhoeffer was dealing with a church that not monolithically but largely said, we don't want to be political. Romans 13, it's settled. We don't get into that stuff. We just preach the gospel. And he said, no, that's not right. If that were biblical, that'd be great, but it's not biblical. If something is wrong and not biblical, do you know what it is? It's an idea from the pit of hell. It's not like, well, that's a C. You get a C theologically. No, you get an F minus theologically. You're serving the devil's purposes when you buy a bad idea, right? And we all do it. We all buy these bad ideas, and it's God calls his prophets and preachers, whatever, to speak the truth, to correct us, to say, careful, be careful. So Bonhoeffer really was a prophetic voice at that time, speaking to the German church, trying to wake them up. And I realized that what Bonhoeffer was saying to the church, his message applies to us now. It's the same thing. The church was making the same error that many Christian leaders are making right now. And they thought they were right. And I want to be clear, many of them were very good people. Think about this, right? Good people can do terrible things. Good people can be silent in the face of evil because they are persuaded that's the right thing to do. Even if it feels weird, they go, we don't, you know. And so it was seeing what is happening to the church in America that made me say I have to write this book, Letter to the American Church, because I thought this happened in Germany in the 30s, and we know the result. We can't say, well, who's to say where that would go, because we see where it went. We see that when the German church did not understand this issue and speak up against evil of every kind, eventually, I mean, the image I sometimes use is it's kind of like, you know, the Lilliputians are trying to tie down Goliath. You know, you've seen that image, whatever, whether you saw it in a movie or whatever. But, you know, Goliath is unbelievably huge. The Lilliputians are tiny, but he's sleeping. And so they're tying him down with, like, thread or rope or whatever. And if he remains sleeping and they continue, at some point he won't be able to get up, right? But if he wakes up in time, he could easily rip up the threads and crush the Lilliputians. So if the church is sleeping, Hitler knew that if I can just keep the church neutralized, keep them neutralized, if I can pretend like I'm on the same side, we can work together, at some point, I'll rip off the mask and reveal my true colors, our true colors, but not yet. Not yet, because we don't want to wake the church up yet. If they wake up once we have tied them down sufficiently, then it'll be too late for them to do anything. And so that's basically what happened in Germany. There was a window where Bonhoeffer saw what is happening. He said, if the church does not speak now, eventually we won't have a voice and it's over. And it's to my mind, exactly where we are today on many levels. And we see that the church's silence opened the door to hell on earth. And I believe that the Lord lays the blame directly at the foot of those who say, I'm a Christian. Because when you say you're a Christian, you say, oh, I believe Jesus defeated death on the cross. I don't fear anything. I don't fear death. I don't fear anything. I'm free to speak the truth. In fact, God has commanded me to speak the truth and given me everything I need to do to speak the truth and to live the truth and whatever. So if you say you're a Christian, you claim to believe that. So if you're not living that, well, now you have a problem, right? So Bonhoeffer is trying to wake up the church and saying, we must stand. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. The church is the conscience of the state. It is our duty. God calls us to speak and to stand against these evils. And so many of them said, not yet, I don't know, you're kind of hot-headed, you're being political, Romans 13, hey, wait. That's basically what happened. And we see the result. And I see that that's exactly what has happened in the American church today. You say, how would this happen? How would that, in the future, how is this going to happen? When I was writing the Bonhoeffer book, I had a prophetic sense that this was coming to America. Now, this was in 2008 when I was writing it, but I had no clue how, right? We don't know how. It doesn't matter how, but we can now sort of get some picture of how these things happen and how it would happen in America. What would it take, And the fact of the matter is that there are many in the church today advocating silence on these issues. And so there are many churches where they think, well, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. You know, we have pro-abolitionists and anti-abolitionists, and we don't want to lose any of our number because we need the tithe of the slave owner, right? Whatever, but you make it up. Make up the parallel yourself. But the point is, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to get political. We'll lose people. Well, this is where you start saying, are you thinking like a corporation? Or are you thinking like a man of God who fears God? And did God call you to the pulpit? Or, did that board of elders who are a bunch of corporate idiots who really, they're telling you what to do? Are you listening to them or to God? And this is a lot of how church is done in America these days, right? And so but the idea is that they have this illusion that you can be apolitical. They actually believe that you can do it when the reality is you can't. In other words, at some point, it's kind of like Tim Keller, whom I love. Okay, I love Tim Keller, but he, I think in the book I talk about how it's not really that he went wrong; it's that things changed and he stuck to something that made sense, 20 years ago or whatever. But if the Democratic Party is, led by Tip O'Neill, that's one thing. You can say, well, we have some disagreements, and it's about taxation, and we've got a lot of blue dog Democrats. They're anti-abortion and whatever. But over time, something has happened in American culture, so that you have the left is now dramatically Marxist, woke. We say that we use the term woke. It's a litany of things that are not just anti-biblical, right? You don't need to be a Christian to recognize it's crazy, right? You don't need to be a Christian if your kids are going to school and they're being asked, like, well, what do you want to be called? They, he, she, whatever. You start saying, excuse me, what? Like, how about like you teach them how to read and do math? And why are you even bringing that up? In fact, it's a kind of child abuse. It's kind of sick that you would ask a child that, if somebody did that, to my kid, I'd be sorely tempted to kill them or to throttle them, because that's like child abuse. That's sick. Now, you don't need to be a Christian to get that, and I'm here to tell you, many, many, many non-Christians totally get this. Okay, you don't need to get this by revelation. This is basic stuff. Roosters don't lay eggs, and we know this. And men can't become women, women can't become men. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have compassion for people that are confused, but the question is, what do you do with that? If somebody says to me, I am Julius Caesar, do I say, yes, I believe you are, Hail Caesar? Is that how I deal with it? Or if I love that person, do I say, actually, you're not Julius Caesar, and I'm sorry to tell you that, but it's true. This is the question, and the question is, we all have moments in our lives where you don't want to offend a person personally, but the question is, what are Christian leaders saying? Are they helping their people get the truth, or are they saying, well, that's too political, we don't want to be controversial? So when it concerns transgender madness, when it concerns, open borders, the concept of having a nation with borders, these are basic things. These are basic things. But things have changed in America so dramatically that suddenly all this stuff has become politicized. And Christians, rather than saying, excuse me, that's crazy, you don't need to be political or anything to know that I don't want fentanyl coming into the country or strangers coming into. You don't do that. Nobody does that. We vet who comes in for a good reason. Most people know this, but these things have become politicized, and a lot of people said, well, in the church we don't want to get political. We're not going to take a stand on that. And folks, at some point, you're going to have to take a stand. When we're talking about do I murder the unborn or not? Can you take a stand on that? Okay. We can talk about abortion, but what about when somebody says, well, we're not talking about abortifacient pills, okay, that a woman gets raped and can she take a pill and whatever like that. That's one conversation. But like now we're talking about if the child is born, do we let it die? Like the conversation has moved so dramatically that the most reasonable people would have to say, this is black and white. This is simple, right? So we are where we are because many Christian leaders have this idea that your faith can be separated from the real world, from the political, whatever it is, and that is bad theology. That's simply untrue. It's as untrue as when Bonhoeffer was trying to deal with people and say, like, you must speak against what the Nazis are doing. You must speak against this. And they said, that's political. And he said, no, you must. God is calling us to speak up for those who have no voice. This is our duty as Christians. We are supposed to be fearless in this. So if they take our life, guess what? Ha ha. We don't believe in that. We believe that Jesus defeated death. So even if when you kill me, you can't kill me. We're supposed to live like that. Now, if the church would live like that, the world will change pretty dramatically. And so Bonhoeffer tried to alert the church. Now, what happened in Germany, just so you understand, the trigger point in Germany was that the Nazis, of course, saw everything along racial lines, right? And you could see, again, a lot of times what we're dealing with is confusion, right? You have a lot of Christians or Christian leaders that would be like, well, I believe what the Bible says, but on this racial thing, I don't know what I think. I'm confused. Maybe the Jews should be separated from the non-Jews. Or maybe, they started talking about racial purity and stuff. And you can see how a lot of people would get confused. Now, today, we would say, well, I'm not confused about it. But I could see how in that era people would be confused. And that's when the church is supposed to say, this is what the Word of God says on that issue, right? So when the Nazis tried to cleanse German culture of the Jews long before it gets to the death camps, we're not talking about that, okay? We're talking about they're making laws as soon as Hitler takes power and saying, okay, we don't want Jews in the civil services, or we don't want Jews in our government, or we don't want to. That's one level of wrong. But then eventually they said, oh, and by the way, the German church, we want a pure German church, and we want a Reichschurch. And they didn't quite have the separation of church and state that we have here. So you could see Hitler thinking, well, we're going to do this in the church as well. We're going to have a German Nazified church also. And that's when anybody who understood the situation said, excuse me, now we have a really clear problem. The church can't put up with that. Because if you have Jewish blood and you want to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, you believe in Jesus, well, welcome to the club. Matthew, Mark, John, Mary, Joseph, I think they may have had some Jewish blood. That's not an issue for Christians. For Christians is your faith. So that's when the Nazis really got to a lot of the Christians. A lot of these Christians finally said, no, we can't put up with this. So they created this thing called the Barmen Declaration, and they said, we will not submit to this. They took a stand. And this is in 1933. And I think there are about 18,000 Protestant pastors in Germany at the time. And I think roughly 6,000 signed the Barmen Declaration saying, we worship the God of the Bible and we will not submit to any other authority. And okay. Well, about 2 years into this, so around 1935, and I didn't discover this until I wrote this book, Letter to the American Church, the pressure that had been put on the dissenters, just as you've seen in America, right? If you believe that weird thing, you can't talk about that. You can't talk about, again, it's not the question of was the election stolen, are the vaccines bad? When somebody tells you can't talk about that, you say, well, that's a little weird. You're kind of making me feel like maybe I might be onto something. Because in America, we're allowed to talk about anything. We have freedom of speech. And you're telling me, no, I can't? You're going to punish me? Well, that's, of course, what went on in Germany. That if you dissented, there was more and more pressure. So by the time you get to 1935, so 2 years later, only about 3,000 of those 18,000 pastors were firmly standing with the Barmen Declaration as members of the confessing church. Only about 3,000 of the 18,000. But the larger point, is that on the other end of the spectrum, there were about 3,000 that were totally pro-Nazi, in the quote-unquote church, okay? But the point is, in the middle, 3,000 here, 3,000 here, in the middle there are 12,000 pastors. And there's a chapter in this book titled 12,000 Pastors, who refused to take a stand, who said, we don't want to be political. We don't want to be known for believing that or that. We're just going to stand here in the middle and kind of see which way the wind blows. We don't want to get in trouble, you know. We just want to keep our churches open, and so we can preach the gospel and the money can continue to come in and we can stay open. And, you know, we don't want to take on anything controversial. Now, the reason evil took over in Germany is because of those 12,000 pastors. Because if any number of them had stood with the 3,000 brave pastors, what happened couldn't have happened. It was less those on the Nazi end of the spectrum than those in the middle. So a lot of times people say, oh, that's like a super woke church. They're really not the problem. There's always going to be crazy, theologically liberal, crazy, anti-biblical. Okay, the real problem is those who pretend that I don't really need to stand against that. I can be right here in the middle, and, you know, we've got some woke people, and we don't want to get into that. Folks, at that point, you are enabling the triumph of evil. So Bonhoeffer saw this really clearly, and he tried to wake up the church and say, you must stand. If you do not stand, evil will take over. But those 12,000 in the middle said, well, we don't want to take a stand. You can take a stand if you want to, hothead, young man, but we're not gonna take a stand. And that's the way it is, isn't it? There are plenty pastors in this country right now thinking like, well, I know that so-and-so's being outspoken on this issue and that issue, but I'm gonna stand in the middle. I'm gonna pretend there's an easy way, a third way. Now, it's kind of interesting because Tim Keller, whom again I revere, but he came up with this idea, which made real sense as a preaching concept, right? He would talk about, you know, the conservative error is this. In other words, it's almost like laws. How do I put it? You know, it's kind of like the works performance Christian, right? The guy who says, I'm going to do this and do this and this and this. I'm going to be a moralist, right? And we know that's not wrong. That's wrong. That's not how you earn your way into heaven, by, you know, performing and being good and going to church and reading your Bible and don't do this and do that. You don't earn your way into heaven that way, and then by looking down on those who don't behave as religiously as you do, right? We know that that's an error, right? And then he would talk about people on the other end of the spectrum who are, you know, the liberals who would say, well, none of that matters. It doesn't matter if you sleep with your girlfriend, or it doesn't matter, you know, if two guys get married, or it doesn't matter. We don't believe that. We just are really inclusive, and we don't believe in any of that stuff. Well, so you have an error over here, and Tim Keller would rightly say, but the gospel says, and the gospel would be in the middle, right? It's not works righteousness, but it is about right and wrong, right? So he called that this third way, in a sense. But we're now at a point where you have a different picture in America, right? You have Marxists who are effectively atheistic, you know, talking about critical race theory and socialism and Marxism and transgender madness and on and on and on and on, and trying to silence, trying to destroy free speech, you know, not just in universities but everywhere. And so to say that, well, you know, they've got a point of view too, and we don't want to take a stand on that, on those woke issues, is to miss how things have changed. Again, if you're dealing with like Tip O'Neill, if he is what represents the Democratic Party, or that's the left, well, then you can just say, well, you know, I disagree, but I'm not going to die on that hill, because you can be a Christian and believe in this and believe in that. Things have changed. And so we're obliged to deal with what is happening right now, okay? Young men and women's lives are being utterly destroyed. I mean, first of all you have to do is say, we, whether it's the government or the school board or whatever, we have more say over the kids than the parents. It's like game over at that moment. That's called, you know, big state communism. That's satanic. That's utterly satanic, anti-family, anti-everything. It's just out of the pit of
hell. But we've been so blessed in America, we've never really seen this stuff. I mean, if you talk to my mother, who grew up in what became East Germany, you know, the communists would do this. They would separate the children from the parents, and the parents couldn't do anything about it. We know that's out of the pit of hell. But that is coming here. And then the question of what are they doing with the kids? I mean, the idea that you would confuse children about their sexuality and so on and so forth, the idea that you would persuade them to go along with destroying their young bodies is satanic. And if you love those kids, you have an obligation to speak up. No differently than you had an obligation to speak up when you saw what the Nazis were planning to do with the Jews or with anybody who dissented. You say, no, that's wrong, and we will stand against it, and we will not have our mouths shut because you say we're being political. You are being political in what you're doing, and we have to stand against it. So the parallels, amen. So in a funny way, when you talk about a third way, and I'm not speaking about what Tim Keller says exactly, but it's like you act like there's a safe third way, there's a religious path, right? I'm not going to be political over here, but I'm not going to be political over here. I'm going to kind of take the safe religious path. When you take that safe religious path, you have enabled evil. You really thought that there was a way to remain neutral, but when you remain neutral on these issues, when you're one of those 12,000 pastors, you are guilty of ushering in satanic evil when you thought you were being neutral. And so I don't know whether Bonhoeffer said it or who said it. Nobody quite knows. You can't trace the quote. But the quote is, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. So there are a lot of pastors and leaders in America who think that they can kind of get a pass by not getting into this stuff. And it's like, well, no. Young people's lives are being destroyed. You know, if you care about black people and you don't say anything about critical race theory or about BLM or whatever, it proves that you don't really care about black communities, because that stuff is destroying black communities. And you should not go with the flow. People say, well, shut up because you're white. It's like, well, 1 + 1 = 2, whether I'm black or white. This is destroying people. God commands me to love those people. So I'm going to speak against cultural Marxism. I'm going to speak against all these things because God commands me to love people. And if I'm silent, I'm complicit in destroying that. And that goes for socialistic big government stuff. That destroys nations, that destroys lives, that destroys communities. The poor suffer the most. So if you're a Christian, you kind of have an obligation to speak on those things, to know that they're wrong, and pastors at least should teach that and should be clear about that. But we've got a lot of people thinking, well, I'm gonna take a pass. I'm not gonna get into that. When I wrote this book, which, you know, talks about all this stuff, and sent it to the publisher, like that day, I think, I get a book in the mail from Zondervan, who I guess they thought of me as some kind of an influential guy that they're gonna send me a free book to check out. And the book was by Pastor Andy Stanley, who I don't really know. I'm not familiar with him very much. But the book is titled Not In It to Win It, and the book basically says precisely the opposite of everything I'm saying. It says exactly that, oh, you know, if you're going to be divisive, you're going to push people away from the gospel, it's all about the gospel. Again, this idea that you can just preach the gospel. And I think to myself, well, what's not a gospel-related issue? If children's lives are being destroyed, if people are dying from fentanyl overdoses, and I go, well, it's not a gospel-related issue. You know, that's like saying slavery is not a gospel-related issue. You know, hey, if you don't want a slave, don't buy a slave. That's your business. Really? You're supposed to be a bold voice, teaching right and wrong and truth, and you're supposed to be clear. So when we say these things aren't gospel-related issues, we're just going to stick to gospel-related issues, which is effectively what Andy Stanley says in that book, and what a lot of pastors have been persuaded that I don't need to be controversial. I can go behind the pulpit and just, quote-unquote, teach the Bible without touching on that stuff. Folks, that is to participate in ushering evil in no differently than the German church ushered in evil by being silent as the Nazis were rising. Because the Nazis were bringing all kinds of false ideas And, you know, you can always say, well, not yet, not yet. We don't want to deal with that. We don't want to take that on. We don't want to take that on. There's going to be a battle. We don't want a battle. At some point, it's game over. If you haven't spoken up, whatever dead gospel you were preaching, you won't even get to preach that. So you have to speak. Now, the horror, and I always say this because it's one thing for somebody like Andy Stanley to write this, but the horror for me is when I went on the Amazon page and I saw this big blurb endorsing this book from Jim Daly of Focus on the Family. And you say, well, wait a minute, I thought he was one of the good guys, right? Well, he is. That's the horror, is that many good people, exactly like in Germany, many good people have been persuaded of these bad ideas. And we need to say to them, as Bonhoeffer said to the good people of his day, sir, madam, you're getting this wrong, and lives are going to be destroyed if you don't stand against this. And if you support this false idea, God's going to hold us responsible. We have to speak against this. So when we say we believe something, you know, I said that letter to the American church, I was going to call it Faith Without Works is Dead. People act as though it's all that matters is what I believe intellectually. I'm saved by faith, so if I can just get somebody to say, I believe Jesus rose from the dead, right, let's pray the prayer, good, you're in, you're done. That's not really the Church of Jesus Christ, folks. If you do not live out your faith in every way, it kind of proves you don't believe any of that stuff. And I think we need to deal with that we have drifted into this kind of private faith in America, which is not real faith. It is fake faith. It is cheap faith, just like the cheap grace that Bonhoeffer wrote about was not real grace, it was cheap grace. And we have to acknowledge that and repent of that and say, how did we get here? And I write about this in the book. Part of how we got here was in 1954, LBJ, who, in case you're wondering, was an unbelievably corrupt bum of a politician. But in 1954, he created the Johnson Amendment, and he basically said, if you say anything political from the pulpit, we can pull your tax-exempt status, right? That is called the government threatening people. That is called the government using the power of the government to silence the churches. And of course, they're going to use it selectively, right? So in the South, you know, if you didn't like some church talking about the civil rights movement, you'd kind of threaten them with that. In the North, you wouldn't do that. In other words, it's all subjective. The point is the power is in the hands of the government to use the Johnson Amendment to silence the churches on whatever they decide needs silencing on. And the church in 1954 across America did not say, excuse me, that is from the pit of hell and we will not submit to that. Somehow we kind of internalized it like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, we shouldn't be political. Yeah, we shouldn't talk about that. That's not biblical, folks. But we kind of let that come into the churches, which led us to this place now where people thought, well, we can play church and have a nice church. And I'm just going to preach out of the scripture, but I'm not going to touch on anything divisive and everything will be fine. But the example we have from Germany in the 30s is that it wasn't fine and that it slowly ushers in evil and more evil until the church is completely neutralized and satanic values supplant the values that were there before. So it's kind of like making an idol. There's another chapter in the book titled The Idol of Evangelism, right? Because that's always what people will say, well, it's all about evangelism. That's the only thing that matters is saving souls, right? And you're like, well, no, not exactly. It's a little more complicated. If you read the scripture, you want to ask the question, is that soul really saved? Or are you just kind of getting them to, they signed a piece of paper and, hey, we got all these cards to prove, how many souls were saved today. It feels like corruption to me. It doesn't feel like real Christianity where people have to be discipled in the truth and they have to be told, you have to now live this out. And you may have to die for your faith. And by the way, if you believe it, you're not afraid to die for your faith because you know Jesus defeated death. You actually know that that's true. You don't kind of think, oh, I hope so. So we're in an interesting moment. And I think what's been happening in the last couple of years is it is already God's judgment. But again, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. I think the horrors that have been unleashed on this country, that God wants to use it, and to some extent is using it, to wake up those who have been asleep. Some of them will never wake up, but some will, and some are waking up. And I really do believe that the Lord called me to write this book to reach those people who can still be reached, and who can say, you know what, I missed this. I was silent. The first time I spoke about this church, it must have been about this book, it was in a church in New Jersey. It must have been weeks after I spoke here the last time. And the pastor came to me privately afterward and said that his elder board had told him not to take a stand on some issue of some sex ed thing, which was, again, out of the pit of hell, in the school district or whatever. They told him not to, and he didn't, even though he felt like he should, but he didn't. He listened to the elder board. And after I spoke on this subject, he took me aside in the parking lot and said, I know now I should have disobeyed those elders and done what God would call me to do. And I thought, this is a great sign, because the next time something happens like this, he will do the right thing. And so this is one of these, a good man who got it wrong, who I think was persuadable. And I think there are enough of them, good men and good women in America, who are getting this wrong, who can be persuaded. Now, one of the ways you persuade them, is, I can, as an author, I could say, give them a copy of my book. I don't, so my wife and I can buy a fourth house. Here's the problem: we don't own a house. We don't own anything. We rent an apartment in New York City, so you're not in danger of making me wealthy. But the point I say is, like, there are people that can be persuaded, and I wrote this book to persuade them. But I will tell you what. If you're going to a church where they refuse to be persuaded on this issue, or you know that, I don't know why you're going there at this point, because we're in a war between good and evil, and I don't think you should ever give a dime to somebody who is unwilling to stand. I mean, it would be no different than putting your money in the hands of the pro-slavery forces, or in the hands of an abortionist or Planned Parenthood. We are in a war, and somebody who thinks they can be neutral, you should not be going to that kind of church. Or you need to make it clear to those pastors, like, listen, you can do what you want to do, but I can't, the time is short. We are at a moment in this nation now where we all need to stand. And if you're not going to do that, I can't stand with you. And by the way, that is happening. Churches like this, and the church that I spoke in yesterday, and others, are increasing in numbers, and the churches that are trying to play it safe and not going there, they are having a hard time keeping the doors open. And that's the beauty of the free market, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the beauty of freedom in America, is that you can go to those places where you're getting truth and courage. And it's one of the last passages in Scripture in Revelation where it talks about who is going to be cast into the lake of fire. It's a chilling thing, and it refers to the cowardly. The cowardly. So cowardice, so the opposite of that, courage, is not extra credit Christianity. If you do not have courage, it proves you do not have faith. God is calling every one of us to believe what is true. Not to, to like try to work up belief in something that might be true. He's saying either I defeated death on the cross or didn't. And if you claim to believe it, live it. Know that you have been called by me to live this, to believe this in your bones, and to live it out in every sphere. And don't let anybody persuade you, like, but not in that sphere, not in that sphere, not in that sphere. It touches everything. When somebody says, that you can, again, you can kind of have this private faith, right? It's like you keep your faith private. There is no such thing. If you believe in the God of the Bible, it's going to touch everything. It's going to touch politics. It's going to touch all of these different issues. It's inevitable, and that's as the Lord would have it. And so anybody who thinks I can have a private faith, it's just what I believe, it's just my theology, that's not faith, folks. That's dead faith. Faith without works is dead. It couldn't be clearer than that is in the Scripture. That's not my interpretation of the Scripture. That's in the Scripture. But you see it all through Scripture. That unless you're willing to stand for these things, you prove to God that you don't believe them, and therefore you're not saved by faith. And so, if only for people's salvation, we should be preaching this message. To say, you need to live out what you claim to believe, otherwise you are not saved. You need to love God with everything you have. This is not the religious part of you. This is not Sunday morning. This is 24/7. The Lord has called you to a new life in every part of your life. It's an amazing thing to me that when you talk about what God calls us to do, the Lord, when Jesus is asked, what are the two great commandments? I mean, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. Can you imagine? Love the Lord your God. You're supposed to be passionate about your faith. It's not about some dead theology. I believe this, I believe that, and I'm saved. No. You're to love the Lord your God. You're to love him. If you believe, if you have faith, you will live out that faith in a way that shows a love of this God who saved you from evil and sin and death and hell. And that's what the Lord is looking for. And that's why he's allowing these things to happen, to wake us up and to make us a holy remnant at this time. And I'm firmly convinced that that is what the Lord is doing, that people are waking up, that good things are happening, that evil is being exposed as we stand and refuse to bow to the foolishness. The evil will be exposed. We're allowing the Lord to do his will, which is to expose every kind of evil. I don't need to name them here, but more and more and more. But if the church will be the church, the Lord can do these things. But the Lord has deputized us. By making us in his image, he has said, it is on you. I will not do it. I have chosen to do it through you. And if you will not do it, it will not happen. And the judgment that you have seen is nothing compared to the judgment that will come and the evil that will come. It has happened in history before. If you don't think it can happen to you, it is because you're arrogant and foolish, because it can and it will. So that's the question. Will we wake up? Will we hear what God is saying? Will we bring this message to those who can be persuaded? Will we do our part? And will we stop believing the lies? That's the question. I am cautiously optimistic, but we have to understand we are in a battle. This is not about, and I think that's one of the reasons, so many people said, we're going to get a red wave. I'm sort of secretly glad we didn't, because if we had, we would not deal with the corruption, and we would not deal with it. We have to continue to battle and battle, and people have to wake up to where we really are, otherwise they won't fight. Now, I know we have a few minutes for Q&A. Is Pastor Chuck going to adjudicate this? Actually, it's nothing. Yeah? You're going to moderate this?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's fun to do before I fall asleep, because I'm still sort of on New York time, but I'd be delighted to answer any questions. As you know, I prefer true or false questions. And then there's a woman with her hand up way back there, but she looks threatening. I wouldn't go to her with the mic.
No.
I know she's. There are.
Well,
but yeah, anything.
Maybe we could just
have
walk
a few
up,
minutes, but
right,
it'd be my
walk
honor
up here,
to,
and you can ask a question. That would be great.
She has a knife. You got a joke. We've got a joke.
Hi.
I wouldn't let her have the mic. Now we're in trouble. All right.
Yeah. So thanks for coming. I was wondering if you think, do you know who Alfred Kinsey was?
Yeah.
And the Project 10 and Kinsey report? Do you
Yeah.
think this is the grown-up version of that?
Well,
And then one last, and then I'll skip back. What does woke mean? What does that, is that an acronym?
what does what mean?
Woke. What does woke mean?
I mean,
Okay.
it's like gay means good as you. They had
Okay, all right. All right, I got the question. Somebody escort that woman out of the building. I'm feeling threatened. Basically, when you're talking about Kinsey, this gets into a big conversation, and I'm not really qualified, but it's the same nonsense that Kinsey was this is in the 50s, but again, these things, it took decades for these lies to work their way into the culture, and you can go back to Darwin or Freud or whatever, but Kinsey is a classic example. The man was a fraud. He was basically a child abuser and a monster, but all the elite institutions act like, oh, he was a great guy because he was like for, against sexual repression or whatever that is. So he's one of the figures that makes it possible for us to get to the crazy where we are now. So that's all I'll say. And when you say, what does woke mean? I don't know. I mean, we know what it means. It's just a variety of crazy ideas that are at war with what I like to call reality, right? So we don't have to convert. We don't have to convert people to the Christian faith. We have to convert people to reality, because the Lord created reality, and all of reality points to Him, whether you want it to or don't. And if you're interested in what's real and true, whether it's in science, last time I spoke about science, I mean, it all points to Him one way or the other. And what we're dealing with right now, I was asked this actually on a podcast, Jack Posobiec, I posted online. He was saying, is there a war on religion? And I said, well, no, there's really a war on God. That's what this is. It's not a war on religion, it's a war on God. People are animated, by dark forces, and half of them don't even know why. They just know that they're angry, and they're at war with whatever it is that God has said. And we're now at a point where, God's saying that He made us male and female. That's a problem. But it's a war on God. And so it's important for us to have compassion on those who are on the wrong side of this battle. We're in a battle, and we have to fight politically, and but at the same time, we have to pray for the people who are this deceived. Because many of them in the past and in the present and the future, they will wake up and realize, I was wrong. I know people who believed things. I was one of them. And God can reach people. So we need to understand that these people who have arrayed themselves against God's truth and the reality of the world, that many of them are going to be converted. And we're going to get to hear their testimonies. Praise the Lord. What a great thing. Yes. I don't know. Is any non-hostile questions? Yes. Yeah. This. Okay. And there's a man back there also, and this gentleman. Thank you.
I've been thinking. I've been trying to formulate this question. But
did you succeed?
Hopefully. I don't believe that there's any time that you retire. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
Did I say I was going to retire?
Yeah.
No. But go ahead. The question is, I have to brief the crowd. This man is 85 years old. I happen to know that because we spoke before. He's one of the people who blessed me earlier. But how is that
How is that
question?
germane?
What's the question? Yeah.
Encourage those with the word of God that says He will renew your strength like the eagle, regardless of how old you are,
Yeah.
and you can be effective until the day you take your
Amen.
last breath.
Amen.
Because that's another lie
So
that we've been told.
that was a true or false question. That, sir, is true. And not only that, but I think sometimes people say, well, how do I do this? What do I do? Let me just be blunt. It doesn't matter. Just ask the Lord to lead you. Whatever little thing you do, the Lord will use it. We're not all going to be like, William Wilberforce or Bonhoeffer or whatever. You do what the Lord has called you to do in your sphere. For some people, that's just homeschooling your kids. Get them the heck out of the lunacy of the public school system or whatever it is, and that takes a sacrifice. And if you do that, you are doing unbelievable things. And if you are a grandparent or a great-grandparent and you can help in a little way, or whatever anyone can do, we can all do something. And the Lord is just asking you to do what He's calling you to do. Not to change the world, just to do what He's called you to do. It's practically infinite. Yes?
Thank you for everything you're doing. How can we be praying for you?
I don't need it. No, that's so kind. I mean, yes, we're in a spiritual battle, and I have to say that this is a challenge. I want the Lord to use me, and there are many, many things that I'm working on. I should mention that I always should mention that if you're interested, if you just go to my website, it's my name, ericmetaxas.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. It's now unfortunately like way at the bottom of the, or maybe you can just text that, but whatever. The point is that I'm doing a lot of stuff, and I want to share it with people. And I don't have a gigantic platform. I'm not on TV, or I'm not, and I want to encourage you to sign up for these emails. And if you don't like it, just delete it. It's not like you have to read every one, but there's some important stuff. We're doing a new. I do this thing called Socrates in the City, which is kind of like a pre-evangelistic thing. I have these conversations with people, and we're doing one in Seattle at the end of April. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and I just want the Lord to use me in the gifts that He has blessed me with. And so, any way that you would pray for me, I cannot begin to say how grateful I am. So, thank you.
You speak of Dr. Bonhoeffer. Did you ever have the privilege of sitting down and speaking with the man?
No. He died 18 years before I was born. He died in 45, but I have met people who knew him, and it was such an honor to me, the idea that I could meet people who knew him. And I write about that actually in the. I know they're sold out, but in the Bonhoeffer book, I wrote a new foreword where I talk about meeting some of these people, and you just feel like, wow, it's an extraordinary thing. And it's clear to me that his voice was a prophetic voice that the church of his day did not hear. But in writing this book, I'm trying to take his prophetic voice to the church in America today, and to say, okay, now will you get this? Now that you've seen what happened when they didn't understand this, when good people kept their mouths shut 5 minutes too long, and what happened? And so Bonhoeffer's at the center of all of this, and most of what I write about in the book comes from him.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thanks for coming, Eric, again. My question is more of an opinion I'd like to get from you, because I know you prefer true or false, so I'll give you a multiple choice.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's
okay.
good. And by the way, I'm going to say B.
Fair enough. In your opinion, though, what group, or how did this evil in America, where did it really begin its traction?
I don't think you can say. I think we always look for, it started in the 60s. It started evil has been here since Adam and Eve, to whom many of us are related, did what they did. And so to kind of look back that there's some halcyon time, that's nonsense, right? That's nonsense. And this is not to say that all times are equal, right? But this has been working its way. Where do you begin? And the answer is there's no place to begin. You can talk about it forever. You can talk about, the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse. And, on my radio program, I talk to people about this if you're interested. But at the end of the day, this stuff is always with us. And sometimes I really think the issue is the complacency. When you're really blessed, as Americans have been for many decades, you get fat and lazy because you say, well, we don't need to do anything. Everything's fine. We'll let those radical Christians in those crazy countries, they'll die for their faith and, risk everything. But, we're good. That's a lie from the pit of hell. We're supposed to, whatever freedom or blessing we have, we're supposed to use for God's purposes. If only to write a check to, I just did a campaign with Christian Solidarity International. There are people enslaved in Sudan today for their Christian faith by radical Muslims, and CSI enables us, by giving money to free them from slavery. I mean, we are wealthy and free compared to most people in the world in every way. We should care about the Uyghur Muslims. They're Muslims, and they are being I don't even want to talk about it. It's horrifying. And so when you kind of act like, well, I just got to worry about my thing or whatever, God is going to judge us because He cares about those people, just like He cared about the Jews. And the German church said, well, I'm going to look the other way. So you can really look anywhere, and So yeah, so when you say when did it get traction, I think you could, if I were forced to give an answer, I could say, well, it was in the prosperity that we experienced after World War II, in the '60s and whatever, that a lot of this stuff was able to happen. But it's the long march to the institutions. It took decades of good people doing nothing. Right? You kind of say, well, how is it possible that China was able to get to this? I'll tell you how it was possible, because like all the Republicans in the past didn't do anything about it. They kind of act like, hey, this is great. We can make money with China. Yeah, we can make money with China. And so if you do not fight evil in your generation, it's going to double and triple and quadruple, and you're going to have to fight your children's generation. So we're kind of here now because we've been, sitting on our rear ends and not living out our faith. And I think the Lord is giving us an opportunity now to repent and to totally live out our faith. And I believe that we can save the nation and bring revival and reformation and great things. But the Lord is saying, this is it. This is it. You don't have 5 more years. Thank you.
I think it's really important that what you're doing, and the thought that came to my mind is in Ecclesiastes, where there's nothing new under the sun, and you're seeing and you're drawing attention to the fact that this is a pattern that was used in Germany, and in that I'm wondering if there were answers from what took place that you would encourage us to do more on a practical level. What is it that you would encourage us to do besides buy your book and share it with somebody?
Well, I'm saying, like, for example, leave churches that refuse to get this, like immediately or very soon, because they are they're deceived and they're asleep, and maybe by leaving you can wake them up. I think that it's vital that we understand this is now. Like, we either do this now, in a few years from now we may not have the opportunity. And that's kind of the point, is that the parallel from the German church is like they had an opportunity, and it got worse and worse and harder, and at some point it was like game over. And so that's, to me, the message is the urgency of what are you doing? What are you waiting for? If you don't act now, whatever it is, get involved in elections, get involved in, there's an infinity of things we can do, but we need to do it yesterday, and not think, well, let's see how it goes, because that's how we got to where we are today. That's, to me, the lesson from the German church.
Okay, and then one other question: have you thought of doing any things together with Jonathan Cahn? Do you know about
I hate
his
that jerk? Just kidding. No, he's a friend.
Do you
and
know
I do
about
stuff
his
together
book?
with him, so I can joke
oh,
around.
okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he's been on my program. You obviously don't listen to my program.
Obviously, I haven't.
I'm not offended. I'm not hurt.
I'm glad you're not.
I pour myself into it, but I'm not hurt.
Because of his book, that just The Return of the Gods.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing you pull out the pattern.
Well, of course.
Of
I've had him on
history.
my program talking about that book a couple of times, and I've done events with him or whatever, and I would, I don't know what I can do with him, but I'm fond of him, and I would love to do.
I just think that you would help.
him.
The combination is not only awakening people like me who really haven't paid attention until recently,
Yeah.
right? Awakening people to not only what's happening naturally right now, but the spiritual aspect of what's going behind
what's behind
what's
it.
going
That's
on.
the whole point, is
Yeah.
that the spiritual is everything. And so that's why when people say, like, oh, I'm just focusing on the spiritual, it's like the spiritual touches everything. And so you've got to be involved everywhere, because these are spiritual battles that we're fighting. Anyway,
Well, thank you for your voice.
Thank you. I see a hand way back there, and then maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe one more.
Okay, there's 2 right here in the front.
Is your radio program here in the West Coast?
I don't know. I mean, actually, I know the answer is yes, but I don't know where it is. But if you go to my website, ericmetaxas.com, or my radio website is metaxastalk.com. But my radio program is, maybe somebody here knows. Is it on locally? I don't know if you can listen to it. But it's all over the country, and you can listen on podcast. You can say, Siri, Play the Eric Metaxas Show, and even Siri, evil Siri, will have to comply. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there any concern with digital books that your books could be tampered with, edited, you know?
No.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, like there's certain things I worry about. I wouldn't worry about that. I'm not worried about that. But I think we've spent way too much time staring at screens, and that the less connected we can be, the healthier for us. But I'm not actually worried about that. No. Yes.
How long did it take you to write your book?
This book, I knocked it out in a long weekend. Yeah. I was chain smoking. I needed the energy, and I just. But yeah, that's pretty much the way you do it. No, that's an easy question in a way. I can actually answer that question. This book, I had to write it extremely quickly, and so it wasn't long. I can't say exactly, but it was like a kind of a preposterous deadline that the publisher said, if you want to get it out by, this date, it needs to be done by this time. So I wrote it kind of like in a fever of, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or something like that. It was really kind of crazy. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend writing that way. But in this case, it was. I had to write it very, very quickly and do nothing else. So thank you for that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Several years ago, I heard two words that scared me. I told my wife, and I really didn't realize why they scared me.
Are these words going to scare us?
It might.
I'm kind of scared that you're going to share these words.
And it was hate speech.
Oh.
Because I told my wife, who's going to be the arbiter of that?
Well, think of how ridiculous it is. Hate speech is kind of like a hate crime. Like, it's not bad enough that I murder you. Like, in the past, you'd be like, you murdered him? Okay, so you're guilty. Now they're like, well, no, you don't understand. He murdered him for this reason. You're like, ooh, that's really bad. You're like, no, the murder is bad enough. And so the idea that we are, again, allowing people to do this, that this could infect the legal system, it could infect whatever, it's madness. And again, we have to, so that's why there are endless fronts in this war. That's the ideas of things like hate speech or whatever, it's just completely preposterous. And I really do think the key is that, look at that. That is pretty cool, man. I want to go to this church. That is tremendous. Oh, no, you can leave it there. Leave it up there. People can write it down. Anyway, but the thing is that each of us in our spheres has to stand against these things. Wherever we are, we have to just say, hate speech. What does that mean? Well, again, I also think that particularly Christians have to stop acting as though I can convert everybody to my point of view if only I'll say the right thing. There's some people that can't be reasoned with, and you can pray for them, but you're not. You're supposed to be a good steward of your time and energy. And I think there are a lot of people running around trying to convince people, and I think the Lord would say, stop. Bless somebody who can be blessed, or talk to somebody who's interested in the truth. There are plenty of them, but we cannot. There are certain people that it's not worth arguing with them. And when Jesus talks about casting pearls before swine, he's making a clear point that there are times when you're not supposed to waste God's time and whatever God has given you arguing with someone. That's not. I think the church has wasted a lot of God's time doing that kind of thing. So that's a good point. Yeah, I think is that it?
Looks like it.
Can I mention again
We've
how
got
much?
one more.
We have a question. Go ahead. Okay.
One more. Okay.
Thanks. So we certainly have the example of Germany. I think as believers, reading through what the Israelites experienced, they had a good king for a while, and everything was good, and then they got fat and lazy and happy, like we've experienced here. And then all of a sudden they were taken over again, and,
Yes.
and that
Yeah,
used to
this is not
frustrate
exactly
me.
a new thing. That's
right.
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 Yeah.
So it's been around a while. So yeah, there's a good precedence for it, and even though it's a bad precedence. So, but you mentioned, was it the Barnum document that?
Yeah, it's in the book. I write about that. It's called I'm sorry.
I said it wrong.
Basically in 1933, the German church wrote something called the Barmen Declaration.
Okay, Declaration.
And that was yes.
So, is there any wise thinkers in the U.S. church that's trying to come up with some kind of a statement?
I think that's kind of like a fool's errand. I'll tell you why.
Okay,
I'll tell you
okay.
why. Because I write in the book about my friend Chuck Colson, the late Chuck Colson, wrote something called the Manhattan Declaration based on the Barmen Declaration. And I was involved with him in this around 2009 or whatever. And I actually write in the book about how frustrated he was that 3 very prominent pastors, total good guys, Alistair Begg, John Piper, and who's the third one? Gummo? John MacArthur, right? That the 3 of them had these kind of sophisticated theological reasons for not signing that, which I don't know where they are today, and I know that MacArthur has been heroic, but I'm saying, but Colson was so frustrated with exactly this, that they created this document, and there were all these pastors, like they had these theological reasons, like, no, we don't want to go there. Somehow they were not willing to put their shoulder, to the wheel with him on that. I don't feel like that's the answer. I think we spent a lot of time doing stuff like that, and I think we don't.
So the declaration has to come from the Spirit to our hearts, from voices from people.
I don't think that we need a declaration. We all kind of know what the issues are, and we need to get busy. And signing a piece of paper, I don't know what happens there.
Right, but it's the Spirit in us sending that out.
Always
to the world.
Amen.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Okay, last one. Okay, last one.
Okay, so I guess we saved the best for last.
I'm going to say false.
Okay.
Aha. All right. Go ahead, Siri. Go ahead.
This is something I thought I would never ask, but I had to. What is your opinion on a homosexual going to church? Are they wasting their time trying to build a relationship with God and make their way to heaven one day?
That's a good question.
Would you say God discredits my faith since I'm gay?
Well, I would disagree with the concept of when people say I am gay. That would be like if I say, I've been attracted to people other than my wife, therefore I'm an adulterer and I need to accept that. And I would say that's not biblical. God calls us to sexual holiness. And I think, listen, the church has dealt so poorly with this over the years because if the church were really living in a holy way, we would understand what a struggle it would be for someone who's same-sex attracted, and we would have compassion. In other words, I wouldn't say to a friend who's same-sex attracted, like, that's a good thing, follow it. I wouldn't say that any more than I would say to a man that I know who has a really painful marriage, and he's met someone that is really wonderful, and he wants to pursue that. I wouldn't say to him, go ahead, because we're all called to sacrifices and battles and those kinds of things. So I think that I don't think there's any question that God loves everyone equally, but I think that you have to be clear on what the goal would be or what the goal wouldn't be. And there's some churches that you can go to where they would affirm someone in a same-sex attraction, and I don't think that's biblical. So I wouldn't. But at the same time, I think how to deal with that is very complicated. But I wouldn't affirm that any more than I would affirm any other attraction that I would say is not biblical. I would say no. God doesn't want you to pursue that. But that doesn't mean that that person can't have a relationship with God. Because if we're honest, everyone is struggling with something. We're all bearing crosses, and to act like, well, that's a particularly bad cross, whatever. We're all dealing with something, and God calls us to deal with that with Him, and so if the church acts as though that's, like, well, so and so, slept with his girlfriend, but that's an okay kind of sin, and it's okay. We're called to holiness, and so as the church itself lives out genuine. This is kind of what I've been talking about tonight. Like, if the church acts like the church and looks like it's willing to sacrifice and to fast and to pray and to make sacrifices for strangers, that kind of love is attractive, and God calls us to that. And so if you're asking somebody to be celibate, that's asking a lot. And so you better be living out that kind of faith in your own life, wherever you're coming from. So that's kind of a long, complicated answer, but that's the best I can do for now. I appreciate your asking it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Good question, good answer. Thank you. Come on, let's give it up for Eric Metaxas tonight.
Kind. Thank you.
Come on.
God bless you guys. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go out there and sign books.
Yeah, let's just wait.
And I just do want to say again, I appreciate every question, and even the ones that weren't asked. You guys are very blessed to have this church, and thank you to this pastor. God bless you, Pastor
Eric.
Tilton.
Thanks, I appreciate that. So let Eric get back there to the back before you clog up the aisleways there, so he can sign some more books. We still have some books for sale. Go ahead and buy them. We hope you buy them out. We want them all gone. We want them all gone. So anyway, thanks for coming tonight. Drive safe. God bless you.